Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, welcome to another Railway Empire video. This is Attican, and we're going to take another shot at that cattle drive. If you saw the earlier video, we did the cattle drive way back kind of when I first started making these videos for Railway Empire, and I wasn't delighted by the results. We got through it okay, but you know, I made a comment like, I don't know how you could possibly hook up 400,000 people and da 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 da, and how hard it was, and you know, now it's going to be a good test to see if we've gotten any better. And by the way, some of you probably notice sometimes I say we. I do not mean the royal we. I don't think of myself as royalty at all or anything like that. I try to say we when we're doing something right so we can all kind of take credit for it. And I tend to say I when I screw up. So I hope I'm doing that consistently, but it's a little silly either way. I probably should say I all the time. But anyway, we're going to play the cattle drive, and we're going to use our rapid expansion strategy. At least the first two phases of it, the rapid expansion, the early expansion, and the wheat cattle phase. So we're going to go out and do beer meat lines because they're the ones that make you money and grow cities. And this one, our early tasks are to move 40 cattle to Sioux Falls, to move meat down to Omaha, and to produce 100 meat ourselves, which means we're going to have to own a meat industry. And we could have gone out and just tried to buy a meat industry right off the bat, but I decided to just really play as pure a rapid expansion strategy as I could to see how well it would apply to this scenario. So we're setting up our line between our first beer meat line between Sioux Falls, our headquarters, and Pierre. And now we're going to go out and find the next closest meet, which is in Rapid City. And we'll connect Rapid City to Pierre, and that'll give us a second beer meat line. And we're going to use that same technique of using these small stations to hook up. And there's not a lot to say because we've talked about the rapid expansion strategy in a dedicated video. We've used it again on the Gold Rush, and it's pretty straightforward building. So I'm just going to kind of watch myself play here a little bit. Hope that isn't too boring for you. And the one thing I would comment there, since you got the two stations, you got to make sure you grab the right one to get the connection, obviously. And I am trying to be, I am trying to use the control function. I am putting in the interim signals, what I'm trying to say, between the cities here, and then putting down my supply tower. And that works okay. It doesn't. You have to kind of slow down your spamming of the trains to get them to space a little bit, but otherwise it works fine. And it does have the advantage of, if you do go back later and add something, like say you want to pick up a raw material and you add it to the line, since you've already, if you haven't built all your interim signals and you forget them, and I've done that before where you don't build them, then you forget them, and then you get a mess you have to clean up, but no big deal. So as we know, debt's our friend, so as soon as we run out of money, we go grab as much as we can. And it would be probably smarter to just grab the one bond and then grab the next one when you ran out of money again. I'm just too lazy. I do them both at once because I know I can spend the money so quickly that it's not going to be a big deal, and I'm going to need that money most of the time I would have had it anyway. So as long as you can build quickly, you can grab all the money you can get. And here I'm just trying to negotiate what's the best way to get this. And that one mountain there, you can see the elevation change right to the west of Rapid City is a little bit of a pain. So we're trying to figure out a way to get it through it or across it or whatever that'll work best, and finally decide to go around it, which just makes sense. And that makes that into a reasonably priced line. And again, on these early expansions, if you have a meat, you find beer. If you have a beer, you find meat. You double track it in both directions, and here we go. Couldn't you see that curlicue defect coming? And it seems to happen the most. It'll happen other times, but it seems to happen the most frequently when you have a curve coming into a station. So you've got a curve, and then you're trying to hook up toward the end of that curve. That's where it really seems to fail most often. And you're going to see what happens here. Aha, another curlicue, hooray. So at this point I'm trying to, and the hardest thing about it is that one there was easy to delete. Sometimes you can't find that little extra phantom piece of track that's causing you the problem. It can be a pain. So this time I'm going to try a little different technique. I'm going to go in and connect one and then come backwards from the station, and that seemed to, all right, whew, no curlicue this time. So we can move ahead. But that costs you time, and mostly it costs you money. And early in the game, that money matters. If you play the game well, there's a point where money really sort of irrelevant. You're making money faster than you can spend it. But early in the game, that is absolutely not the case. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set up our trains in between Rapid City and Cheyenne, which is, again, beer to meat. And our goal here, the reason we kind of went down to Cheyenne, there were other ways we could have gone up north or whatever. I want to get down to have a connection to Denver because our opponent is down there in that area and will help grow Denver a little bit. So and we've got Cheyenne to Denver is, again, beer meat. And if Beatrix is going to help us by growing Denver a bit, then when we can participate in that growth, and it'll help us. And here we just have a little target of opportunity. We get a bonus for connecting that log industry, clearing, I think they call them. So we're going to connect it up, and if we're going to connect it up, we might as well make money on it since it's right there in front of us. And I'm thinking about going both directions, and then I have a second thought and think, no, I don't want to be sharing a line like that. So I go ahead and set up in the one direction. Everything looks good. So we're going to set up a line and run some logs up to Rapid City. We'll make some easy money on that. It'll help Rapid City's growth a little bit. And might as well, it's there. So this is all kind of paid for. This is all free money. Now as these trains run, they'll make more money. And so that's really a good thing. And here what I want to do actually is expand the station and run the line down to Cheyenne from a different platforms because the two of them will run on different kind of intervals or frequencies, and we don't want them messing each other up. And we certainly don't want them sitting out there blocking the main line. So we want both trains to be able to go back to their station every time, but we also want them to be able to load and go run off to their respective cities whenever they need to. So now here we can hook up. This is our fifth city. We've got Sioux Falls, Pierre, Rapid City, Cheyenne, and now this will give us Denver. And every one of them is a beer meat line. So if we follow our little method with the rapid expansion, beer meat lines, and then do the wheat beer phase, then we should be able to see good city growth on all 5 of these all through the early stages. And that's what we need, because one of our goals, of course, is to connect 400,000 people in our first 2 years. And all these towns on this entire map are tiny little towns. They're like 20, 30,000 people or less. Some of them are down in the teens. So to get 400,000 seems like a daunting task. In fact, I used to think it was just, oh my goodness, but it can certainly be done. Now we're doing a little sanity check, worried about the time because I'm not even looking at my first requirement, but it's only March of 1850. In other words, we're less than 2.5 months into this, and we've already expanded out to 5 cities. And once we get this one done, we will have 4 profitable lines running, 4 profitable beer meat lines running, and making us good money. So we have established a strong economic footprint on this map. We've got 4 good profitable lines running. They didn't cost us an arm and a leg, and they certainly didn't cost us a whole lot of time to set them up. And a supply tower and about 3 trains, and we're going to be rocking here with, like I said, 4 good lines. So now that we have our 5 cities out there, we've done our early expansion. The next phase is to go into the wheat and cattle phase and hook up those beer and meat industries to their respective raw materials so that they can continue growing and our lines can continue making more and more money. And in this case, we have to get that cattle to Sioux Falls. That's one of our objectives, is to get 40 cattle to Sioux Falls. So it's just naturally, this is what we would be doing regardless of the method we used. We would try to run the cattle over there to Sioux Falls. And we're going to make sure we run at least 5 trains to start with, because they can each carry 8. 8 times 5 is 40. So that means one trip for each of those 5 will give us the 40 that we need. And that way we can make sure that we get those 40 as quickly as possible. So what we're going to do here is follow our usual procedure with our banking. We're going to say, well, if the money that I need is greater than the debt, in other words, if the bond is smaller than the money that I need, I'm going to close out the bond first so that I can open a bigger bond and have more money at my disposal. And in this case, we need, like, I think it was 150-ish to do that line one way. It means we need about 300 plus a tower, 300, 330, something like that, in order to really do what we want. And then, of course, we want to do the trains as well. So we're going to repay this bond, and then that way it'll allow us to open up a bigger bond. And that gives us enough money to go ahead and build our line. In fact, we can build it, in both directions. Now, had we just said, okay, don't think about the bonds and just save the money, we would have waited and saved enough money to build the first line. But then we would have waited and waited again to save enough money to build the second line, and waited to save enough money to build the supply towers, and waited for a lot of waiting. And it's better to just do a slightly bigger wait at the beginning on your bond, close out your bond, and open bigger bonds. So that's a basic technique you want to get in the habit of using. That's how you really take advantage of those bonds. And as we've said many times, debt is your friend. So now we're just finishing off that connection, and we've got enough money to do the whole thing, and that's beautiful. It's going to at the end of the day, that was much faster than waiting and waiting and then waiting again. And the good news is that the train money, because we have 4 good profitable lines running now with a decent number of trains on them, the money's going to come in fast enough that we can spam out our 5 trains pretty quickly. There, we just had a slight wait on the 4th one, and we'll have to wait for just a moment on the 5th one.
You really should pay more attention to the maintenance of your locomotives.
But that's pretty good. So now we've taken care of that first objective. It isn't done, obviously, but we've got the infrastructures in place, including the trains, to get that done. So as soon as those guys can load, they can head down there and finish off that first task. So our next big task is to produce meat. So we need to own a meat factory, but we're going to first make sure that we keep our growth up and stay with our wheat beer phase, and we're going to run wheat down to Pierre. And one reason, and this is a somewhat expensive line to run wheat. Of course, that cattle line was very expensive, and that's the thing about this map. There's some pretty big distances you have to cover on this map, so there's no cheap investments. So here we're going to have to do a little crossover. And as I've said before, if you're getting a few of these crossovers, that's fine. If you start seeing yourself building bridges over everything, either your opponents have taken over all your turf and you've messed up that way, or you've messed up your plan somehow. And there might be a restart in your future if that's happening constantly. But it's okay if it happens occasionally. It almost has to. Now, we could have actually avoided that, interestingly enough. There's wheat down there to the east and south a little bit, but it costs actually more to run it up the hill and over the river and up the hill to get up there. So this is actually the cheaper route. And that wheat is also, well, you'll see. We'll use it for something else here later. It's going to be our friend in a little bit. So now you can see our money's racking up pretty nicely. And we get that chief engineer, and he will allow us to have cheaper buildings, and that's a good thing too.
You really should pay more attention to the maintenance of your locomotives.
So we're going to run another line out for this. There's our standardized components. That's my favorite research in this time period. The Dragon for 200 and then 300 for standardized components. And you throw in Trixie's 20% off locomotives, and your locomotives are really cheap. And that just makes me smile, because now you can run a lot of trains for very little money. So we're going to run another line off of that. So we expanded the station so we could come down here and run a line to the meat industry in Rapid City. Again, we're looking at city growth and improved profitability by doing this, and we really are just following our method. We're running wheat and beer. And I'm just looking for a good place to put these 2 new employees.
The meat is first choice and will find many buyers.
So that must mean our 5th train made it down to Sioux Falls from our the cattle ranch up there. And now we're going to put a little more pressure on that cattle ranch by starting to run some of the cattle down to Rapid City.
You really should pay more attention to the maintenance of your locomotives.
I'm actually looking for wheat, and I don't see any. There probably, I think there's actually would have been wheat better. I could have done better by going down to down around Denver somewhere. There, I think there's wheat down there, but the line isn't too bad because it's just connecting into this existing line between Rapid City and Cheyenne. Now what I'm trying to do, of course, is run wheat down to Cheyenne. So the actual track isn't a whole lot more expensive than it would have been had I found something closer, but the line itself is a long way, so I got to run a lot of trains. But of course, our trains are cheap, so it's not the end of the world. But this one I probably could have done a better job, go down further south and gotten wheat down there. But I don't know if I lost patience or what, or just wasn't seeing. But you can see our numbers are ticking up. You see that counter, we're up almost to 200,000 population now, and we're still in our first year. And the reason it's ticking up is because we're following our process. We've got beer meat lines, we've got, and we're starting, and they fed the population to start with just by themselves, and now we're starting to help them out by pumping in the cattle and wheat needed to keep those 2 industries, beer and meat, moving and keep the goods flowing between the cities. And this will work for, as I said, through the early stages. This will get you close to 60,000 for a lot of these cities just by doing this process, just doing the beer meat and supplying the wheat and the cattle. Now, if you really are in city growth mode, obviously you want to do your pass-through warehouse or whatever technique you use for growing your city. But right now, what we're trying to do is just keep our profit up. We're trying to, we are trying to grow the cities for sure, but we're kind of growing across, if you will. We're growing a bunch of cities at a steady clip, rather than trying to take a couple of cities and really making them blow up and grow really fast. So this is in contrast to, say, for example, the gold rush where you've got Carson City, you're trying to get to 100,000 quickly. And there you just kind of focus your efforts on Carson City and just start pumping all kinds of different goods in there to make them grow as quickly as possible. Here we're doing more of like I said, more of a spread out growth of 5 cities at a steady pace to get the growth that we want to see.
You really should pay more attention.
But you can see here we're having to run quite a few trains to cover that distance to get down. But that's okay. It works. And like I said, the research strategy gives us cheap trains, and our character gives us cheap trains. So the other thing we haven't done, we need a meat industry. So here I'm trying to figure out how much do I need to bid. And my tactic is, and I've used this successfully before, you find one you wouldn't mind owning, and you find one that you really want. And the first thing you bid on is the one you wouldn't mind owning. And the goal is to bump it up so that your AI competitor, this works especially well with one AI competitor, can work with 2 or 3, but it's really good with one. Make a bid on the one you wouldn't mind owning, run the price up, and then let them win it. And then that ties up their cash. Then you immediately bid on the one you do want. So you're going to see we're going to take that technique. But here, what did I do here?
Nice for you to win.
Oh, I just messed up so badly. I had a chance to buy that cheaply, said no, and then said, oh, goodness, and went out and bid on it. So I kind of delayed myself a little bit by buying that cattle ranch. I wanted the cattle ranch anyway, but I just kind of messed up the timing of it here. In fact, right now, we're going to head into a whole series of things where it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to, where I made a couple of goofs, and you'll see how we kind of recover from it. So our goal here now, again, we're going to repay the bond, get ourselves more money because we need some cash to be able to do this bidding that we want to do. So we actually going to use the bond money to pay off the other bond and then open yet another bond, and that gets us up to money. We've got enough money now to play with. So we're going to place a bid on the meat industry in Omaha, which would be okay to own. But actually, it's interesting, and there I decided to bump her up. She bid, and I decided to bump her up, and here's where she throws me a curveball.
It's probably good
Ugh, I win. I win the bid. I really didn't want to. In fact, honestly, if I was going to do that one again, I wouldn't even pick that particular, that meat industry. It's ironically enough, the meat industry in Omaha is almost worthless because you only get credit for shipping meat into Omaha. So you could make buku, you could have a level 5 well-supplied meat industry in Omaha, and all it's doing, it might make money for you, but it's not going to help you hit your goals. You have to ship the meat in. So now we own this somewhat worthless meat industry. So I'm thinking, well, I need to run my cattle ranch that I just bought in there and supply it. But I have a change of heart. I try to get back to what I really had planned on doing. My original plan was to take that cattle ranch, and you'll see what we do in Wichita, and use that combination to help us out. So I start by building this line, and then I would say thankfully, I went back to my original thoughts. So we're building this line from our cattle ranch to Omaha, and then we decide, no, that is not what we want. So we're going to go back and set up our line. We're going to do something with Wichita. But first we realize now we've got a station in Omaha. I mean, this is just where you make a mistake and it just compounds. But we need this anyway. We need to be shipping meat to Omaha. In fact, we're probably a little slow on this. That's one critique I would have. I was too slow setting up this line. But we're going to run a line straight down from Sioux Falls to Omaha so that we can start shipping meat down there. And we came back to this because we tried to put a station in Wichita, and it wouldn't let us because we had a disconnected station. You can only have one city that is disconnected. That you haven't tied into your line. You can't go out and put stations all over the place without connecting them to your network. So now we're going to finish off that line down to Omaha. so that we can start shipping the meat from Sioux Falls and Omaha. And keep in mind, the one I really wanted, of course, was the meat industry in Sioux Falls, because that way I'm already supplying it with cattle. I could own that industry, and then I'd be able to bump it up, and whenever I had funds, and increase my flow of cattle, and have a nice short line to run meat down to Omaha. Now I've still got the same thing. I've still got the nice short line. I can still run meat down there, and we're going to set up a special little deal here. We're going to prioritize meat and say you have to be full. Now you can fill up with whatever else you got to keep moving, but you got to run meat as much as you can. So it's going to grab meat, and we're going to run, like, I think it's 6 trains down here, and they're going to stack up on top of each other to start with, and they're just going to queue up, and each one is going to, as they fill up, the next one's going to go. So that's just the technique we're going to use to prioritize our meat. We could have a separate, obviously, we could set up a express line for passengers and mail, and set up a separate line for freight, and haul meat down there. But the problem with that is, because Trixie is in Omaha, we can only have one station, which gives us only 4 lines, and we're going to have to build a lot of stuff here. So I decide to take care of to use my little folly by making my line from Wichita go up and connect with that line I've already created. And that'll be one side of my tracks from Wichita to Omaha. And then what we're doing right now will give us the other side. So now we'll have a double track going from Wichita to Omaha. And you probably look at that and saying, Wichita with its furniture industry, that's brilliant. But you'll see. Okay, so now you're seeing the plan is to buy that furniture industry and replace it with a meat industry right next to that cattle industry that we own, and with a good direct straight shot right up to Omaha. So that's the plan. And here's I goof up right here. I had a chance to buy for $171,000 a meat industry in Dodge City, which I want anyway. But I'm kind of committed to my plan down here in Wichita, and so I pass on it for the time being. So let's see what I've done here. I bought a meat industry in Omaha I didn't want, but that's just the luck, a roll of the dice there. It didn't quite work out the way I wanted. I ran a line I didn't need from the cattle up to Omaha, but then I cleaned that up and made use of most of it, so it wasn't a total loss. And what else has happened to us? That's about it. That's all the goofs, but that's enough goofs. So now I'm using the bond trick again to get some more money, because now I want to go into another purchase. I want to be able to get that furniture industry that's down here in Wichita. It's a little pricey, $432 with no customers. I think that's a little high. For $440 is a little high for a furniture industry that has no customers, but so be it. It's strategic to me. So she leaves us alone and we grab it. and we know it's going to cost us $300 to tear it down, another $300 for meat, so we need $600,000. Our bond that's open is a little less than that, so we're going to follow our procedure again and close the bond and open a bigger bond, because we really do need to start producing meat. Okay, so now we've got $700,000 to play with, and we've got enough money to demolish that furniture industry, because we can't afford to wait for growth to put a new one in. And we're going to place our meat industry, and this even becomes a little problematic, the placement of that. But where I really goofed up was, well, you'll see in a minute. I made several mistakes on this one. This was not a perfect play by any stretch. But I will say, with a certain amount of pride, it was a good play. So now we're going to feed that meat industry with the cattle. And the nice thing is it's cattle from our cattle ranch. And here's where I actually, I got really goofed up here. I was not seeing this correctly. I should have had, this station really belongs on the other side, turn the opposite way. And I should have just expanded that station that was already existing to run my cattle. So see what I've done here? I've blocked myself out, so I can't even expand that other station. But it works out okay. So again, several goofs here, and they all seem to happen right here in this section of the map. So apparently, I don't like this section of the map, even though it actually worked out beautifully for us, and was kind of one of the keys to victory. But oh, sorry, spoiler alert, we do win. I really messed up down here. About 3 or 4 little mistakes. So now rather than build another station, we're just going to use the one we already built. It's a little longer line, but no big deal, because, it's a short haul either way you look at it. And of course, as we know, freight prices are the same regardless of distance traveled. And you notice I haven't set up my line to Omaha yet, the Omaha-Wichita line, because it's going to be another one of those special lines, and I want to make sure I can get some meat going. So now we have meat going into Wichita, cattle into Wichita. Now we're going to set up our line Wichita to Omaha, and it's going to be another one of these special cases where you prioritize meat and you run full. So don't just run off with a boxcar of passengers and a little bit of mail. We want trains that are full. So here's a case where they actually are able to wait and get enough passengers and mail to go. And we give it another one, and it's going to take a while for it to even get loaded up. But we've got cattle on the way. We've got our new industry going, so we'll start seeing meat getting shipped on this line pretty soon. There we see our first little boxcar of meat being produced by our Wichita meat industry. And we're going to run several trains just like that. And they're going to run full every time. And you could, of course, obviously, you could just set up a line that literally ran only meat. But I thought if there's no reason to have a train waiting when it could grab some mail and passengers and head on up and make some money and come back and do it again later. So that was the thinking there. I do put it in a museum because I want this city to keep growing, and I still would like to own this industry. And it's not that bad a price. $330 is not that bad for a profitable industry. I'm not even sure why it's that cheap. That could be part of the whole scenario. They're giving you a shot at buying that thing, but of course we haven't done that. Now we need to grow Wichita because you can only expand your industries based on having a big enough city to have the infrastructure to support a bigger industry, which I think is really cool. So we're going to run. We've got meat in Wichita, so we're going to run a line to the nearest beer, which is Oklahoma City down there to the south. So we're going to, and here's where I realize, oh man, did I mess up? Look at this. I can't expand that station because I got the other station with its line running in there. So I go, oh man, I hope I can expand the other one. And fortunately, just lucked out. We were back far enough that we could expand this other station and use it. So there's where I tried to really mess up, and fortunately I got away with it. So now we can run a line from Oklahoma City to Wichita. And it turns out I didn't even need to do the extra expansion. The 2 tracks would have been fine. But we're going to run a beer meat line from Wichita to Oklahoma City. And I'm willing to sacrifice some of the beer, or meat rather, that could be going up to Omaha so that it can go down to Oklahoma City, grow Oklahoma City, which will then in turn make sure that it can send me enough beer coming up to Wichita to keep Wichita growing. Because the main thing here, of course, is to grow Wichita. So we may sacrifice a little bit of meat. And we didn't have to. We could have turned the meat off going down to Oklahoma City, but I didn't feel like that was going to change the outcome. And might as well make the money on it and get that growth. And keep in mind, we haven't hit our 400,000 yet, so we still want cities to grow. So here's going to be another meat beer line. Wichita already has the cattle coming in, and in a bit we'll end up giving wheat to making sure that Oklahoma City gets wheat, and now we'll have another line where we've got 2 cities growing, helping each other grow. Now Wichita just went through, it's got hit the 20 mark. That allows us to expand up to a level 2, which we immediately do. And then we look at our source, our cattle, and we've got to get that cattle up so that it's producing at least as fast as our meat industry needs it. So we're going to need some more money to expand our cattle ranch. In fact, we're going to need to expand it a couple of times. So it's up to 4.8, and I think we're needing like 7 in the meat industry right now. So we're starting to produce meat. We're starting to ship goods, meat to Omaha. Little slow on both of them. I probably, a little critique, stayed almost too method and didn't be quite specific enough for the scenario. But I really wanted to test the use of the methodology, this whole rapid expansion methodology, and so I kind of stayed true to it. And not an excuse. I don't know. I could have played a little bit better, I guess I'm saying. And by the way, we haven't set. This is a good one. This is one of life's little ironies here. This is actually a key move. Remember we bought that meat industry sort of by mistake in Omaha, and here's Omaha, the meat capital of the world, where you want all the meat, and the best thing we can do there is destroy the meat industry and put in a brewery. Now, why do we do that? Because now we have a beer meat line going up to Sioux Falls and a beer meat line going back down to Wichita, and that meat industry wasn't making any money because it wasn't getting any cattle. But our beer industry will make money because there's a wheat farm right out there just outside of Omaha. And Beatrix is running off of that wheat line into Omaha. So she's actually bringing us wheat, which we can then use in our brewery. So now our brewery makes money. It's going to help Sioux Falls grow. It's going to help Wichita grow. It's going to make our return lines. You know, we've got these specialty lines from Wichita and Sioux Falls that are specializing in meat and in running full, but they do come back. And when they come back, now they can start bringing beer back to each of the cities, helping them grow, and we're making more money because our return from Omaha trains are running closer to full. So that move right there, it may seem strange to take a meat industry out of Omaha, but it's actually a really good thing. It's just what you need to do. So now we've got our meat to Omaha, and we're trying to get our production up. And we're making over 4 a week. So we're doing okay, but we just got started a little bit late. And now if you look at our funds, we got a lot of money. So we're really starting to make money here in a serious way, which is great. Now we're going to try to buy that meat industry in Dodge City. It's going to cost us about $280. We could have had it for $171, but the timing was bad before. So this has worked out just fine. Now we can produce more. And what we're going to do, we also have to hook up all 4 of the cattle ranches on the map. So we're going to go up there and grab this. This will be our 3rd one to hook up. Run it down to Dodge City to that meat industry we just bought. And we bought it before there was any hookup while it was nice and cheap. We're going to put in our station.
Well, everyone has to start somewhere.
And after my fiasco in Wichita, I'm careful to orient it the correct way. So going to run a line and bring cattle down to Dodge City, and then eventually we'll take that Dodge City cattle and ship it off to Omaha. So now we'll run a line from our Dodge City station over and run it up parallel to this line coming out of Wichita. And it would be tempting here to just merge it in and save money, but I know that, you know, to hit that 1,000 goal, shipping 1,000 meat to Omaha, we're going to have to eventually pump a lot of trains up here with a lot of meat. And so we're going to avoid any traffic jams by just having a dedicated line. So there's going to be a dedicated line running from Dodge City to Omaha, just like there's a dedicated line from Wichita to Omaha. And I did make one mistake here. We'll see it come up later, a minor mistake. I didn't plan far enough ahead on this one, but everything's cool. So we're running our line all the way up to Omaha and going to tie it off up there. So Dodge City will have its own platform to come into Omaha and deliver the meat. And it's nice when your economy is getting strong enough that you can build a long double line like that and not bat an eye, because you've got plenty of funds to do it.
Come on, budge your station over a bit. There's
So again, we're going to use our technique where we say load up on meat as your priority and run full. And if you've got other stuff you want to drag along with you and you don't have enough meat to carry, then fine. But we're going to spam out a bunch of these trains. They're going to kind of queue up in the station and be ready to go. We've got like, I think it's 8 trains we're going to run. That's a long line. Yeah, make that 10 trains. So we're going to run a bunch of trains from Dodge City to Omaha. We're going to make sure we've got enough cattle coming in there to keep that meat industry happy. We'll, as you can imagine, we're going to expand that meat industry to go. One of our optional tasks is to be producing 20 meat per week. And that takes, you've got to have a lot of pretty big meat industries and a lot of good shipping in order for that to happen. So now you can see we're almost there on our first 3 tasks. We're right on the edge of having our 100 loads of meat. So we're kind of, this is probably a really good place to wrap up this first one. So we've done rapid expansion. We've done our wheat cattle phase. We've kept these cities growing through the early stages, but because they are beer meat lines and both the beer and the meat are being satisfied. In fact, right here, we're going to go out and make sure that we can grow Dodge City by running a line over there to Raton, which is another beer city. So we can run a beer meat line there, give us yet another beer meat line, and this one will allow Raton to grow and more importantly, allow Dodge City to grow. So that, and the reason we have to grow it, one, we want the population, of course, but the real reason is so that we have the opportunity to expand the meat industry and ship more and more meat up to Omaha. So let's cut it off right there. We finished our first 3 tasks, I said, plus a couple others. We're off to a good start, and we'll wrap this one up in a part 2 a little later. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.